Okay, so today we're going to be again talking about relative identity. If you guys haven't seen my first video on relative identity, you guys should go watch that before this because this is going to be about clearing up two of the main objections that I've seen to my video and just in general to relative identity. Let's get right into it. So the first is this is that people are trying to argue that somehow um, relative identity makes no sense when we apply it to reflexivity, transitivity, substitutability, but I think mostly what people have been pointing to is reflexivity, right? When people just write that x equals x, they're like, it doesn't make sense to put an x equals the same f as x in the case of just saying something is reflexive. Well, this is just a huge category error because reflexivity is something that is necessary for FOL, first order logic, and it's also necessary for second order logic and all other higher order logics. But I guess the point is that where the misconception is coming from is that people do not understand that Leibniz's law, or what a lot of people call classical identity, is a second order law. It only exists in the second order. And if you don't know the difference between FOL and SOL, or first order logic and second order logic, this is where the confusion is coming from. You cannot even say that Leibniz's law applies or somehow it's baked into reflexivity when reflexivity is a condition for establishing any equivalence relation at all, and it works, or it functions in first order logic. And Leibniz's law requires second order logic because Leibniz's law is quantifying over predicates themselves. And if you don't know the distinction between FOL and SOL, the best I can sort of easily explain it is that in first order logic, we're quantifying over individual things like we might say car or cars or red or apples or humans or dogs or that dog. We'll say that dog is red. But in second order logic, we're quantifying over predicates themselves. So we're saying for all P, right? Or relations. So in the key that you need to understand, if you're one of those people that was thinking that about reflexivity, or the guy in my comment section was talking about Barbara, if you guys know what Barbara is in logic, saying that it assumes Leibniz's law because there's indiscernibility or substitutability. I mean, that is so confused. I hope that the best that I can clarify it is understanding that if there's something that can be used in first order logic, that means it does not need Leibniz's law to be used, because Leibniz's law is a second order logical principle, right? It's saying for all properties, or it's saying if x and y are identical, then they share all properties. It's quantifying over properties. It's not quantifying over an object, right? Or objects. It's quantifying over properties themselves. So you can't, of course, you can't relativize reflexivity, just like you can't use Leibniz's law on reflexivity, because reflexivity is the very condition for giving rise to first, second, and higher order logics. It's the condition for giving about more robust forms of metaphysical identity, like Leibniz's law. So hopefully that clarifies it a little bit. If you guys don't know the difference between FOL and SOL, again, I'll put up two examples on the screen for you so you can see the difference. One quantifies over objects, that's the domain of quantification. The second is quantifying over predicates and relations. So you can't, just to stress it again, you cannot say that when I say x equals y, that somehow that assumes Leibniz's law just because they're substitutable, or just because they're transitive, or just because x equals x, that's reflexive. None of that assumes relative identity, Leibniz's law, any of that. That's what we call primitive identity, or just the basis of an equivalence relation itself. Leibniz's law cannot quantify over it because Leibniz's law exists in the second order. The second objection is I saw it on TikTok. I was just watching TikTok and one of my friends brought it up to me. And I guess they're calling it the mono-humanity objection. And they're saying this. Basically, it's like, well, and it's in relation to the Trinity. They're saying, well, if we count one God and we're saying that the persons are all identical to the one God, why don't we just count one humanity or one human and say all persons are identical to that one humanity or one human? And somehow people have taken this to be an issue with a form of predication, like Leibniz's law or relative identity. They're saying it's an issue with relative identity. This is another category issue. This has nothing. I'm not going to say nothing because you have to predicate to say these things, but the issue here isn't about predication. It's about your metaphysical commitments. It's about how you individuate, which is going to have to deal with your metaphysics. If Let me give you an example. Like in Leibniz's law, there's the potential to count three gods, even if you hold to Leibniz's law. But because of your commitments metaphysically, or because whatever the Quran has revealed that there's only one creator, you have a metaphysical commitment, and you have a form of predication that can account for that. Just like in Christianity, the Bible, through divine revelation, we're taught that there are three persons and there's one divine essence. So the question, why do we count why do we count multiple humans and not one human, is about a person's metaphysic, because there's nothing stopping them, even under Leibniz's law, from counting one humanity. Depends on what your view of universals and particulars and things like that. Just like in relative identity, there's nothing stopping us from counting three gods. The form of predication can allow for that, but that doesn't mean it's true, right? It's going to be more of an empirical question about what are we committing ourselves to? Do you believe in universals? Do you believe that universals are instantiated? Do you have good reason to believe that each human is an instance of some substance or something? Like, it depends on your metaphysics. The whole mono humanity, it's just a huge category error that has nothing to do with relative identity, in the sense that it's an issue with relative identity. Because what they're saying really is, yeah, we can count. Okay, they're saying, yeah, the LPT is solved, but you're just randomly picking and choosing when you want to count and individuate humans, and when you don't want to individuate something like God, in a sort of token instantiate type deal. No, that's not true at all. We're not just randomly picking. People have metaphysical commitments. They have background commitments that you are using your form of predication to try to navigate, to try to to try to identify different relations and how they are divisible. Like, if you don't believe that humans have minds, you might even be inclined to deny persons, right? Or something like that. But that relative identity can account for there being no persons, right? It can account for there being 1,000 persons and one human, right? Or one humanity. Or it can account for more of a nominalist view, where there's humans is maybe like a resemblance nominalist, and you count individual humans. It depends on your metaphysics. So it's just, Wildly confused. I know that these things are hard to understand if you're not used to the whole language stuff in analytic philosophy. So I hope that if you guys have some questions that you guys ask them, I'll make videos um, answering any questions that you guys have. I love making videos now. So just shoot away. I'll either reply in the comments if you guys leave a comment, or if it's a good enough comment, I will make an entire video about it. And if you guys would rather me do this in like a classroom setting, like I did my last relative identity video, I'd be willing to do that as well.